Chapter 27. "Okay," Malou said after gazing at the coastal forest. "You kids need to dress with long pants, long-sleeve shirts, and grab your shoes to walk through that forest." She sounded adamant. "But, Mum," Gabby protested. "No buts, young lady. The three of you are going to do exactly as you're told," Malou added, going down the stairs and toward the sleeping quarters. Stefano and Daniel exchanged a glance, shrugged, and then followed their mother and sister. "Can I ask why we need to be dressed like that?" Daniel asked, slipping into his long pants. "This is a tropical forest, son, and trekking through it is not as simple as you think. You've got to worry about insect bites, snakes and spiders, all of which will attack you unexpectedly." Malou shook her head. And I have no desire to see any of you die from a bite from these nasty things. Understood?" "What about water? Do we need to take some of those water bags I saw stored at the back of the cupboard?" Stefano suggested. "Yes, that would be an excellent idea," Malou agreed. "What about Damianos? Do you think he's going to appear anytime soon?" Daniel asked. "I don't know, but knowing him, he's probably the one who organised this little excursion." "Why are we getting all dressed up?" Gabby asked. "Doesn't he usually do that?" "That's exactly why I'm asking you to get dressed up. He hasn't shown up, and I'm starting to wonder who got us here." "But didn't you just say that he's probably the one who led us here?" "I know what I said, Daniel, but I don't know any more than you do, so it's better to be prepared." Once they had filled the water bags, had climbed over the boat's railing, and jumped onto the sand one after the other, they made their way silently toward the luxuriant forest. Before taking the first steps through the bordering plants and trees, Malou touched her dream catcher. It was warm to the touch and prayed. "Dear Lord, I know that you are watching over us, and I thank you for your vigilance. Could you also take us safely to where you have decided to lead us? Amen." As soon as Dan hung up the phone from talking to Fabio, a pang of regret hit him. He slumped into the kitchen chair and touched his dream catcher. "God, I just want to be a pilot," he cried out, his gaze raised upward to the ceiling of the apartment. "Why couldn't I change the things I've done?" Fury now lacing his mind, Dan brushed the newspaper aside and put his head in the palms of his hands. "It wasn't right then, and it isn't right now," he hollered. "No need to yell," Damianos said quietly. "I know what you are going through, and although you cannot change the past, there might be a way to alter it, so that your dream could become a reality for you and your family." Dan lifted his head to look at Damianos sitting across the table from him. "What do you mean by altering the past?" "Do you recall the time you're at the top of the ski slope?" "Not that again. I don't want to think about it right now." "Why not, Dan?" "Because I should never have gone down that hill." "Exactly my point." "What do you mean?" "I mean you could not change the fact that you went skiing on the day, but you could have chosen another slope and altered the course of your history without changing your future." Dan had his eyes riveted on the old shepherd's face now. "You really think I can take that training then?" "No, Dan, that is definitely not what I'm saying." "What then?" "You can't change the fact that you did not take the Navy pilot training, but you can certainly choose another slope to reach your future, or even a better future, if you so wished." "But how? I've already applied for a position at Seagate. How can I back out now?" "In the same way as you could have backed out from the treacherous hill and choose another one." They had been walking for nearly half an hour when Malou stopped, looked up through the tree's umbrella and said, "We're nearing a clearing. Let's follow the light." "It looks all same to me," Gabby said, wiping the sweat dripping from her forehead. "It's hot, sticky, and it smells like a compost bin around here." "That's because you're in a natural compost bin, dear," Malou said to her. "Why don't you have a drink and get some water in you?" "So that I could sweat some more? No thanks," Gabby objected. "Come on, Gabby," Stefano said. "You're not on your way to a beauty contest or even on Survivor. You need to replace the water you keep losing." "And if I don't?" Gabby snapped back obstinately. "If you don't, you'll pass out from hypothermia," Daniel put in. "This is intolerable, you know that?" Gabby said, taking a swig of water from her water bag. "Are you sure there's a clearing up ahead?" she asked her mother. "As sure as I can be, Gabby. It's much lighter directly ahead of us, and that means there is a spot open to the sky, no trees to block the sun rays." "How come you know that much about this kind of forest, Mum?" Daniel asked. "Well, when I was a little girl, my dad used to take me to the rainforest near Butilia back home, and he taught me how to find my way in and out of it. And it's like riding a bike. I never forgot it. All that he taught me was coming back to me as soon as we stepped into this forest." "What do you think we'll find when we get to that clearing?" Stefano asked. "That I don't know, son, but a clearing in this type of forest is surely man-made, and it would take the constant cutting back of regrowth." "How fast can it grow back then?" Daniel seemed very curious. "It depends on the rain. If it rains regularly, the growth can be as quick as a month or two. These lianas are getting thicker. Daniel said as he continued fraying a passage of his siblings and mother to follow the narrow track he was creating behind his steps. Let me help then, Stefano said, walking past and ahead of his mother and sister. Yet as he did so, he didn't realise that one of the lianas was not a liana at all, but a snake slithering up one of the low tree branches. The reptile fell at his feet, frightening Gabby, who jumped back with a screech. "Oh no!" she then screamed as she lost her footing and fell backward against the tree trunk, scaring a bunch of small spiders out of their nest. Malou didn't hesitate. In a bounce, she went to her daughter's help, grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. The raucous had wakened more than the spiders, for the entire forest was soon invaded by the sounds of quacking birds, yapping monkeys, and the shuffling of invisible animals escaping into the undergrowth. Still whimpering her disgust and brushing the small beasties from her arms and legs, Gabby sounded enraged now. "Whose idea was it to have us go through this horrid place?" she bellowed, glancing upward at the tree canopy. "If that's your idea, Damianos, you and I will have a serious talk when you next show your face, you know that." "Has it bitten you?" Malou asked Stefano, totally ignoring her daughter's obvious resentment towards this state of affair. "No, Mum, I think that poor thing was more surprised at being pulled by its tail than I was frightened of it," Stefano said, shaking his head. "Okay then, we better move on before anyone else takes an interest in us," Malou said, grabbing Daniel's arm and moving ahead with him. "What about me?" Gabby demanded, flustered and tears running down her cheeks. "What if I have been bitten by one of these spiders? Anyone cares?" "Come on," said Stefano, taking her hand and squeezing it tightly. "We're almost at the clearing. It'll be fine then." He looked at her red face. "And it doesn't look like you've been bitten either. But I also think another drink of water would be a good idea. If that helps, if that keeps up, I won't have to go to the spa when I go home," Gabby remarked with a smile now. "I would have had the best thermal bath on earth." "Maybe we should buy this island and build a spa so you could invite all your friends to experience such a heat," Stefano replied, while both he and Gabby continued walking behind Daniel and their mother. "Where are they now?" Dan asked after a few moments of silence had passed between the two men.
"If you mean your wife and children, I believe they're on their way to my house."
"Your house?" Dan asked, baffled. "What house is that? I thought you lived nowhere, or everywhere you were needed."
"Precisely, but whether a cat or a human being or a messenger such as Nicholas, we all need a place where to rest our heads when the toils of the day are done," Dan shrugged.
"And where's that house of yours then?"
"Wherever I need it to be."
Dan glowered at the old man. "Enough, Damianos. I don't care where you sleep. I care about my family. I want to see them now."
"I'm afraid your impatience is again getting the better of you, Dan. You know very well that your family is safe. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here trying to talk to you now, would I?"
Dan grunted. "But why all this rigmarole? Why can't I just join them now?"
"We live in God's time, Dan. It's not up to you or me to decide. Besides, you still have a dream to catch, don't you?"
"What on earth do you mean? If I can't take that Navy training, what then? What am I doing here?"
"Good question. I believe you will find the answer when you and I take a little trip."
"Oh no," Dan yelled. "You're not taking me anywhere. Just tell me what this alternative you talked about is, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it happen."
"Very noble of you, Dan, but nothing is ever as simple as that when you are the only one who should know the alternative that will fulfill your dream and make it a reality."
"If you're saying that I have to choose the alternative myself, then I'll have to think about it, because right now I don't know what I should do." Damiano shook his head.
"I know that stubbornness is another one of your traits of character, but in this instance you need not to think of what you should do, but of what you want to do."
"You mean other than taking the training, right?"
"What dream do you really want to catch, Dan? That's my question, and it should be yours from now on end."
"Okay," Dan agreed, nodding. "But where did you want to take me on that little trip of yours?"
"To a house where you'll spend a great deal of time searching for a book."
"Oh, you mean the book I saw in my dream the other night?"
"Yes, the very same."
"But I saw a ball of fire going through the living room. What about that? Did you try to kill that poor old lady?" Damiano scuffled.
"No, Dan, that ball of fire wasn't mine. I don't dwell in the haunts of Lucifer."
Dan was staring now. "Are you saying it was of Satan's doing?"
"With everything that happens in life, there are always two sides to the same coin, Dan. If you experience something good, you can be sure there will be something bad to accompany it."
"How's that?"
"Let me see if I can explain this clearly for you," Damiano said reflectively. "With birth comes death. With sunshine you will have rain, and with rain plants and flowers will grow." Dan frowned. "So you see, God maintains a balance in all things. You know what could happen if the rain would stop falling on your garden, or if the sun could not shine, don't you?"
"Of course, all things would die," Dan replied.
"Exactly. And when you've accomplished a good deed, such as finding your book, there had to be a downside to the find. Lucifer had to find his presence felt just as a warning for you and Malou to stay on the path that was traced for you. And if you had strayed from the road on which you were travelling at the time, there would have been consequences to befall you.
And I guess Malou and I didn't stray, did we?
Not quite. At least you did stay on the straight and narrow, but forgot your instructions at the last minute.
And that's why I fell in my past, isn't it?
Yes, Dan, yet your accident became an opportunity for you to redress your past or choose an alternative to your future.
There's always two sides of the same coin, Dan repeated and smiled, finally.